The funeral was elegant. Cold. Like the people who planned it. My husband, Julian, was lowered into the ground under gray skies and gray words. Mostly from his parents, Walter and Elaine Stroud. Stroud Capital's founding family. Wealthy. Regal. Ruthless. They stood there like statues, nodding at condolences, offering none. I wasn't asked to speak. Julian had been gone 3 days when Walter called me to the office. Just to go over succession logistics, he said. I wore black. No makeup. Let them see the woman they assumed was crumbling. But I wasn't grieving. Not anymore. I was calculating. If grief ever masked your rise, like, share and subscribe, because this isn't about tears. It's about power. And what happens when the silent one holds the keys you never saw? Walter sat at the head of the table, flanked by his attorneys. Elaine offered me tea like I was a house guest, not the woman who'd co-founded the West Coast division, negotiated the largest client deal in company history, and watched her husband die in a hospital bed 3 weeks earlier. We're restructuring, Walter began. Elaine folded her hands. You'll be well taken care of. I smiled. Of course, I said. But before we talk about that, we should review Julian's addendums. Walter paused. What addendums? I opened my purse. Pulled out a flash drive. The ones he signed when we updated the bylaws. 6 months before the expansion. Walter's face twitched. Because he knew exactly what I was talking about, and he'd thought it was buried with my husband. The flash drive didn't just contain documents, it carried ghosts, contracts, amendments, signed, dated, notarized, all uploaded 6 months before Julian's death, when we quietly updated Stroud Capital's internal structure to prepare for our expansion into Asia. Walter had signed off on the expansion budget, but he never read the fine print Julian slipped in. Clauses that restructured voting rights if the majority shareholder passed. Julian had been that majority. Now I was. Elaine blinked at the screen as the firm's legal advisor opened the PDF titled Succession Update, March Revision. Page 2. Upon the passing of Julian Stroud, all operational control of the West Coast Division and all voting shares held therein shall transfer to his spouse and co-founder, Evelyn Stroud. That was me. Walter's voice cracked first. These weren't filed with board consent. I didn't flinch. They didn't need to be. Section 9.4, Subclause B. Julian had discretionary power over succession for the West Coast Division. You gave it to him in 2019, remember? He remembered. I could see it. Elaine did too. Her tea went untouched. They thought I'd crumble. Mourn. Disappear quietly with a payout and a polite press release. They forgot one thing. I was in every room Julian had been in for the last 10 years. I'd built the internal systems, hired the leadership team, negotiated the acquisition clauses they'd never even read. They let me operate in the background because I never asked for credit. Now I didn't need to. I had control. The boardroom used to be Walter's arena. Dark wood, long table, chairs positioned so the sun always hit him just right during morning meetings. I changed the lighting before my first official session as acting executive chair. Fluorescent. Cold. No shadows. No thrones. They arrived with thin smiles and paper-thin excuses. Temporary adjustment, Walter said, gesturing to his folder like it was a shield. Pending reevaluation. Of course, I replied. Let's review your last quarter's numbers first. I have a few questions. I had all the questions. About misreported budgets, delayed fund transfers, and the side investments he tried to quietly bleed through the Hong Kong office. Julian had warned me before he died. If something happens, follow the numbers. And don't trust the legacy. They care more about the name than the truth. So I did. And now I had the proof. They thought legacy made them untouchable. They didn't know I kept every receipt. I slid a file across the table. A detailed breakdown of funds diverted to a shell firm registered in Elaine's maiden name. You've been siphoning capital from the division Julian and I built, I said calm. For 5 years. Elaine went pale. Walter tried to interrupt. I raised a hand. I'm offering you 2 choices. Step down quietly, with your shares redeemed at face value. Or I file for a forensic audit and let the SEC do the math. Silence. Then finally. You'd destroy your own family? I leaned in. You did that when you tried to erase me. The boardroom was quiet when they resigned. Walter's voice, usually booming with old money arrogance, was barely above a whisper as he read from the typed statement his lawyer had prepared. Elaine didn't speak. Her eyes stayed fixed on the table, lips pressed tight. They signed, stood, and left through the private elevator they once insisted I wasn't allowed to use. I waited until the door shut. Then I turned to the board and said, "Now let's build something better." The executives were stunned. Most had never heard me speak more than a few lines in passing. They had no idea I had been the architect behind Julian's entire expansion strategy. That the numbers he got credit for were mine. That the culture they admired was my doing, not his parents' cold, inherited hierarchy. I didn't want applause. I wanted precision. We removed Walter's old guard. I promoted talent from the bottom. People who had vision, not family names. We restructured the trust, renamed the fund, and most importantly, we deleted Stroud from the next generation of branding entirely. They thought their name would outlive me. Now it doesn't even appear in our press releases. 2 weeks later, I held a town hall. Public. Transparent. I announced our new leadership direction and invited every employee to review our new values initiative, rooted in merit, ethics, and shared growth. It wasn't flashy, but it hit. And in the back of the crowd, I saw one of the junior analysts, barely 24, overlooked by the Strouds for years, cry. That's when I knew. I hadn't just taken back the company. I'd built something they never could. Loyalty. The final document sat on my desk for exactly 1 hour before I signed it. A full divestment of all remaining Stroud family shares. Purchased under market value, finalized under public silence. Walter and Elaine took the deal. They didn't want a courtroom. They didn't want press. They wanted escape. I gave it to them. On paper they retired. In truth they surrendered. I signed the deal in black ink with Julian's old pen, the one he kept clipped to every suit. Not out of sentimentality. Out of symbolism. Because even in death, Julian had given me the final clause that made this possible. He trusted me. Not his bloodline. Me. The day the new name went up on the company's headquarters, I didn't attend the unveiling. I didn't need to. Instead, I stood in the break room with the admin assistants and interns. The ones the Strouds used to overlook. We toasted with cheap champagne and whispered jokes about how fast the empire turned. That night, Walter emailed me one last time. "You've made your point. Let it go now." I didn't respond. I let the silence speak. Because this wasn't about vengeance anymore. This was about correction. They thought legacy was something passed down through names. I proved it was earned by action. Julian's name may be gone from the building. But his vision? It lives through mine. Thank you for walking through this inheritance war with me. Like, share, and subscribe for more stories where silence sharpens into power, and forgotten women become the last signature that matters.